All right. Well, welcome to today's episode of Business from A to Easy. We're going to do another interview, and we figured we'd try to go live. And so, if you've seen the topic, oh, I'm listening to myself. That's really trippy. If you've seen the title, then you know exactly what we're talking about. This is Wade Plumlee. But before we get into that, I kind of wanted to go over how this is going to look. If you'd like to ask some questions while we're live, feel free to do that, and we can see those and pull those up on the screen. But without further ado, we are going to add Mr. Wade Plumlee to the live stream. Wade, what's up? Let me turn you off mute here. Here's our technical difficulties. There it is. What's up?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hey, man, what's up?
This is awesome. So you are honored, I guess, or probably not honored, but you're dealing with it to be our first live episode.
Guinea pig.
Yeah. How's it going?
Good, man. Just living life over here.
Out on the West Coast.
Yes, Washington State.
That's awesome. So how long have you been out there? You grew up out in Washington, didn't you?
Born and raised. Yep.
Okay.
Out in the deserts of Washington.
Not the Seattle side. You're out on the
eastern. Yeah, we're on the eastern side of Washington.
So is that what's the difference between East Washington and West Washington? What are some of the biggest differences?
Western Washington is more rainy. They're more liberal. That's where all of our government stuff comes from. So on our side, the east side, we are very conservative, which surprises people, but we're very, very conservative out here, and it's a desert.
Right. So not a lot of rain.
No, we hardly get any rain.
That's crazy. So, because most of the time people think automatically Seattle, Portland, whatever, and they're
they think,
oh, it's the
rain, green trees.
Right.
Out here we have sagebrush, sunshine.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. So that's a pretty big difference.
Oh, yeah.
So I've known you for a long time. You've always kind of been, and I don't know if this is stereotypical, but just real manly about the manly life, you know? And so do you think that comes from your upbringing, like where you're from, up in that part of the country, or do you think just
maybe more? I think it probably comes more from my family upbringing. My dad's a very, very manly man.
Right.
He's very big and bulky and all about work and.
Right. Yeah. So welder, weightlifter, all that kind of good stuff.
Yeah. So he's a welder for like 35 years now. Lifts weights all the time. So.
Right. So he's out there. Yeah. So you grew up around just what I guess a lot of people would call toxic masculinity.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. But I remember when I first met you, you came to school, big wrestler. So you did a lot of wrestling in high school.
Yeah, did wrestling in high school. And
what kind of accolades wrestling wise?
I am probably one of the worst wrestlers you've ever met. But I love
it. That's awesome. That's awesome. I just remember when you got to school, it was just like, here we go, everybody, bring it on.
Wrestle everybody.
That was awesome. So did you pick up welding at all?
Yeah, that's what I do for my job now. So
okay.
I'm a sheet metal worker. My upbringing, my dad welds, my uncle welds, my grandpa all welds. So.
Yeah. So did that lead into, obviously you're a knife maker, that's what we're going to be talking about today, Plumlee Knives. And is that kind of what got you into making knives? What got you into this?
It had a part I would say into it. So when I got back from college, my dad was like, hey, you need to watch this show. It's like one of the best shows ever. And when he was saying that, I was thinking, it's going to be some boring documentary that he really likes to watch.
Right.
But anyway, it was Forge and Fire was the show. And I watched it and I was like, wow, this is really, really cool. I mean, I had no idea you could do this still.
That's
I kind
awesome.
of thought, it's something way back in the old days. But anyway, that kind of brought it to real life then. And so I watched that show for many seasons, many years. And then my friend James Green, from James Green as well, pastors down in Florida, but he had gotten into it. And I saw him, I was like, man, he got into it. So I started asking him some questions, and I was thinking, man, my whole life I've been around metal work and everything. I was thinking, well, how hard could it be? I mean, they do it on TV. James got into it. I should at least be able to try it at least.
Right.
And so kind of just jumped in, both feet, not knowing
That's
what I was
cool.
doing, just kind of YouTubing how to make a forge. And
Right.
through that, I learned that my father-in-law, he does blacksmithing, and just kind
Okay.
of for fun.
Right.
And so he kind of gave me some pointers and tips how to get started, but then kind of just took off from there on my own. Lots and lots of YouTube and internet searching, figure out how to do things. But that's how it kind of just started, you know. First the show kind of brought to light, and then James kind of started the trip about 6 months before me. And now we're kind of just go back and forth all the time.
Yeah, that's awesome. So it really full circle. The show that got you into it, you were then on and won. Like, it's
Yeah.
pretty amazing.
So I started, it was about 4 years ago. 4 or 5 years ago now is when I first started, made my first knife. And then like a year into it, I saw they were doing a casting call on Instagram. I was like, I mean,
yeah,
what are they gonna tell me? No, I mean, tell me no, it's whatever. Still, so I applied, did some like interviews online. They did some like FaceTime interviews with them, and they just kind of showed me had me show me my work and just talk through things, make sure they knew what I was talking about at least a little bit.
Right.
Enough for the show.
That's cool.
And so then I went through a few interviews, and then I got a acceptance email. And they're very they'll talk to you for like a little bit here, and then they'll take like big breaks where you don't hear anything back from them for a while. So from like my first interview to like when they accepted me, it was about a year. And then from when they accepted me to when they actually called me to be on the show was about another year.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So is knife making, and really quick, we got people watching. It looks like we've got four people watching live. If you guys want to ask a question or comment, we should be able to see those and add those on the screen. Feel free to do that, and we'll put them on if you want to ask Wade a question. We're up to 5. Holy smokes. So if you guys want to ask Wade, go ahead. And if you don't mind, share it too. Let's get it out there and kind of tag or hashtag Forged in Fire. Let's get the ball rolling and get people on here. But what I was going to ask is, how big is that world, the knife making world? Is it pretty small once you really get into it and kind of? I know when you get into a hobby, that world really, it doesn't shrink, but you get to know people real quick, and you can kind of gauge how big it is and how friendly people are. Is it a big world?
So once you bring the internet into things and like worldwide view, it's pretty big. Like they have it's called Blade Show in Atlanta, just a big show where they have a bunch of custom knife makers, and then they have like company knife makers come and just show everything.
Right.
And that has like thousands of people for that. But then everywhere you go, there's going to be little pockets of people here and there that you didn't even know about before. So in my area, there's probably about 2 or 3 other guys, not real big in the area, but you can go pretty much anywhere, I would say, in the United States and find little pockets of people everywhere.
Right. That's cool. So I kind of got into that with the window cleaning a little bit because there's online communities, and once you start, you really start to rub shoulders with people and kind of get to know them. You see their stuff. And then convention, same thing. It's called the Huge Convention. And you go to that, and once you're there, you kind of meet those people, and it's like, hey, I've seen your stuff. It's cool. So it's really cool. But once you're in that world, then it really starts to open up. What's it been like since before you were in that world, before the show, and then now that you're a champion? Has it given you some kind of street cred, or is it like, hey, this guy's legit, or have people kind of fanboyed over you a little bit or anything like that?
Nope.
All right.
So
that's awesome.
I mean, I was able to meet a few people from the show, but really it's kind of it's got a good connotation, the show, and kind of a bad connotation in the knife making community. For people that they've done it for a while, they say like, this isn't real knife making. Like,
oh, it's a gimmick or something.
Nobody really goes out and cuts up cars, or they don't go out and cut this piece of metal up and make knives out of that. And you don't do it in 3 hours, you know.
Right.
A typical knife maker, they'll buy known steel. There's like all these different kinds of alloys they can use to make different knives and stuff. So they say the best one is the one you know what it is. That way you can heat treat it properly and everything.
Right.
And then it takes more than just a few hours to make. So they'll take days, weeks, depending on what they're making, but they'll put more time than just what the show is. So the bad side of it, people say, is that's not real knife making. It kind of gives us a bad look. And then other people are saying, well, since the show started, that it's given more eyes to the community, where people that didn't know about it, like myself, I didn't know about it before the show, but now that it's out in the world, people see it, and then they're able to get into it a little bit better, and see what's true and what's not.
So, I mean, I guess I get it kind of as a purist. You know, if you're a knife making purist, you're like, this is sacred, don't mess with it. And now you got a TV show where people are coming in and making light or whatever.
Yeah.
But
well, you have people that even, I've been on the show now, and so people will come and they'll ask me, they're like, oh, can you make a knife out of this scrap piece of metal? I don't know what that metal is. It could be mild steel, which it won't hold an edge or nothing. I can make it look like a knife, but to perform like a knife, where it's going to hold an edge real well and do what it's supposed to, I can't do it if I don't know what it is exactly.
Right.
So,
yeah, it's interesting because I didn't realize that the differences in material and how big of a deal that really is. It does matter. I mean,
oh yeah,
especially watching a couple episodes of that show, if that knife breaks, that's awful. You know, you're talking about something that could kill you. So you want to have the right materials. What's your favorite material to work with?
I really like doing Damascus work. So it's two different types of metals, if you don't know, and depending on what you're doing, you're basically taking two different metals and fusing them together, and you can make a different pattern out of it, depending on how you manipulate it and everything. Right. But the typical two metals I use for that is called 1084. And so the 1084, it stands for something, but I don't remember what it stands for.
Right.
But it's a all high carbon steel that we use. So it's going to have a lot of carbon, which is what you need for edge retention and for toughness and everything that you need in a knife.
Right.
Yeah.
So, with Damascus, that's the one with the waves on it, right? And the different colors.
So like typically you can do that. Darker. There's a dark and a light side to it. So with that, most people, the basic one is called a random pattern, which is the one you're going to see all these different shapes in it, right?
Right.
But one's going to be dark and one's going to be light. But you can layer those up like a cake, and then you can mold those and shape them, and you can make some crazy cool patterns out of that.
That's awesome. So have you played with trying to make different patterns, or is it just let's stack them up and let it go?
Oh, no. I've done some. Twist is another pretty basic one. So you take all those layers and then you'll twist it up a bunch. And then when you flatten it out, you'll see kind of the layers of this swirling twist into it, which is a pretty easy one, but it's a real fun one to do. And then they have, I mean, as much as you want to think about it, there's different patterns for everything.
Right. That's cool. So we could talk about that kind of stuff all day, but let's get into some actual business side of it. This is not your main job, right? You have a job, and this is a side hustle.
Correct. So I have a full-time job as a sheet metal worker. I weld there. Do that about 40 hours a week, and then I get off about 2:30 in the afternoon, which is nice. I get to come home. My wife's still at work, and so when she's at work and I'm home, I usually just go out in the shop and do whatever I'm working on at the time. So it gives me a few hours, and then I'll get Saturdays if I need them or whatever I need. So
real quick, if you guys are watching and you don't mind to share it or tag Wade in here, Wade, if you want to share it while we're on, I don't know if you have already, or I don't know if you can since you're on your phone. But if you guys want to ask Wade a question, feel free to ask. They'll pop up on here and I can pull it up on screen. But we're going to get into really what it's like to balance a work life, 40 hours, and a side hustle, and how to maybe one day transition full-time knife making. Is that a possibility? What's that like? What's that life like balancing those?
So to go full-time would be nice, and I'd really like it, but if you look in the whole knife making community, the guys that go full-time, they really struggle with their business. I mean, there's some guys that they'll do it full-time, and once they get to a certain level, they can sell knives for like thousands of dollars or tens of thousands if they're nice enough. But that's very, very rare in the community. So And I have diabetes, and so my job provides healthcare through that, and so that's probably a reason I don't want to go full time, just
Right.
because diabetes takes a lot of money to pay for stuff.
Right. Get really expensive real fast.
Yeah,
Um, so to make that jump is not a common jump. So a lot of times with like side hustles, a lot of people will do like lawn mowing or, some type of service business where it's super repeatable. It's easy to get customers. To make a jump is not that big of a jump. It's not that
yeah.
hard to do once you build up a good clientele. Knife making is probably not, it's not a world where you can do that very easily.
It just depends on how your clientele's doing, but even then, if you know you got a steady source coming in and out, you
Right.
don't know what it's going to do next month. So
Yeah.
like, man, Christmas time might be really good because everybody's buying knives for like family members or for
Right.
themselves, whatever. But maybe January, everybody spent all their money in December. Now you're like, well, I got all these knives, but nobody's buying yet. So
Right.
it's kind of like you just got to play the market, I guess.
Right. James, I saw you were on here. James does like farm shows or not farm shows. What am I? Farmers market,
Markets, yeah.
and he'll go set up at markets with
Yep.
his knives out there. Have you ever done anything like that?
I've done one little market like that. I went over to the Seattle area and did it, and it wasn't that big of a hit.
Yeah.
But it
I,
was just that certain show.
right. It's interesting because you would think handcrafted, hand forged. That would almost well. Here's the thing. It's an art. That's what a lot of people I don't really put together. This you're an
Yeah,
artist, which is
yeah.
kind of a weird thing to
A
think about.
functional art is what we call it.
Yeah, that's pretty cool that you can have a side hustle where you can make some cash, but on that you made it with your hands. I get to experience that a little bit. This is a service we provide, but
Yeah,
you made that, and that's pretty awesome.
yeah. So even like the first time I ever made a knife, I pulled this thing out. I'm like, man, dude, look at this. This is so cool. I made this by my hands. But now looking back at it, I'm like, yeah, those weren't so pretty. But now
Right,
I look at my stuff, I'm like, man, I can't believe from what I first started to what I make now. It's crazy. I can't believe the stuff I'm doing right now.
right, right. And now imagine where you'll be in 5 more years.
Yeah.
It's pretty awesome. What how much time goes in a knife on average?
That's a very difficult question because if you think about knives, you've got all sorts of different knives. You got kitchen knives, and in kitchen knives, you've got about 1,000 different knives in kitchen knives, and you got
Right,
outdoors knives, and you got all sorts of those, and there's like thousands and thousands of knives you can make. So I typically stay with kitchen knives, and mine take if I'm doing them like every day, I can do one in a week.
yeah,
And that's just if it's a plain looking blade. If it's Damascus, that's going to take longer. Or
right,
if I'm doing some kind of crazy handle or whatever, the more
right,
basic it is, the less it's going to take time. Um,
right. So
but it just depends on what
10,
you're doing.
15, probably minimum 10 hours maybe?
Probably more than that for the knives I'm at now. When
Yeah,
I first started, because your skill's not there, and so you're going to you don't know what you're doing, so you just kind of spend less time on stuff before you think, man, this is awesome. But the
right,
more you get into it, the more like shows you go to, or the more other people's work you see, it's like,
right.
oh man, I could do that. I could do this a little bit better. Hey, I should
Yeah,
incorporate this into my knives. And so you got to take that extra time to, hey, I got to add this, or I got to do this now, or I got to clean this up a little bit better. So it
right.
takes more time.
So yeah, there's so much that goes into it. That's crazy.
There is quite a bit.
Yeah. So I'm gonna ask another question on that, but if you guys don't mind, ask a question. I want to see if this works. We're trying something different. We're live for the first time ever, so even if it's a dumb question about something super random, we'll make Wade answer it. So ask
I
it.
am married.
He is married, so don't try. All right.
Yep.
Nice try. But ask a question. We'll pop it up here. I just want to test it out and see if that'll even work. If you don't mind, share it too. Um, so we're talking about 15, 20, maybe more hours in a knife. You're gonna have to charge for that. So have you ever run in or have you run into a little bit of a little have you run into people going, this is too much for me. I don't wanna I don't think I wanna pay that. You run into that a lot?
Somewhat, yeah. So people will ask me, hey, I just want you to make me this kind of a knife, but don't make it anything fancy or anything, thinking that not being fancy is going to make it cheaper.
Right.
But really, my main cost is going to be like metal, and then my handle material. You can go fancy
Right.
and go crazy on the cost of that, but most handle materials are about the same.
Right.
So like if I go something basic, it's not really going to change the price that much. Not enough where I'm going to like give you like a $50 knife when it costs me like 50 or 75 to make.
Right. Especially when you have that much time invested in it.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. People have to understand that. And I kind of run into that a little bit too. Got a couple questions coming in. So that's awesome. Thanks, guys. We'll add those here in just a second. But I run into that a lot too, because what happens with me is I want to give a deal. I want to give I want to be nice, but some of the stuff is just expensive. And it's like, I don't even want to work with you because I don't want to tell you how much this is going to be. You kind of run into that sentiment.
Yep. So we call that red flags, or I call it a red flag, is when somebody starts talking like that. It's like pops up like, I don't really want to. Yeah, I got to talk to you now.
Right. Don't waste my time.
And that's not to be mean, but it's like, I know you want something cheap that you're just trying to get something cheap that you think it costs this much, but really you're not thinking about, hey, I got to get metal shipped to my house. I got to pay for the propane to put in my forge. I got to pay for belts for my grinder and all the consumables that people don't think of. And those things add up real quick. And so they're thinking I just want like a $50 knife. I don't even know if I could make a $50 knife with the materials I use.
Well, you're just not set up for that. And your quality is way better than a $50 knife.
Yeah.
All right. So David Rutherford asked us a question. What's up, David? He asked, how would I go about making a knife how would I go about buying a knife or a branded singlet?
Oh, I feel like this is some memories from college.
Yeah, the singlet right there.
So my business, I run it like,
He wants a singlet.
He wants a singlet.
David. Sorry, I just put it together. Oh my goodness. That's awesome. Okay, how would he go about buying a knife?
So for my business model right now is I make whatever I'm feeling. So if I want to make a kitchen knife, I'll make a kitchen knife or whatever is on my mind. And I'll set that up and I'll put it on my Instagram, which is Plumlee Knives on Instagram. And then I also put it on my Facebook, which is Wade Plumlee on Facebook. And that's where I sell my stuff. Eventually, if I ever get enough stock built up, where I get enough where I can put them online, make a website, that's the plan. But right now, everything I make sells out so quick that there's no reason to have a website because it sells out so quick.
Right. So there's Plumlee Knives on Instagram?
Plumlee Knives on Instagram or Wade Plumlee on Facebook.
Okay. All right. So you just go there and you can order or see what you can buy from you there.
Yes.
Sweet. Okay.
Singlets are coming in next week. Just kidding.
We saw the hats. That'd be awesome. James said, consumables cost more than materials.
Yes.
Let's pop it up on the screen because we can do that. Again, this is the thing. A lot of people don't understand that. When you're talking about business and owning a business, people don't understand that there's a lot more that goes into it than just the cost of getting, paying that person to do it. So for me, what it looks like is this. I'll have people say, you're charging $400 to clean the windows on my house and it takes you an hour. You're making $400 an hour. And from that point, it's like, yeah, that sounds right. But the truth is there's so much that goes into it. I got to pay for my trucks, my fuel. I've got to pay for my website, my marketing. I've got to pay those guys. I have to pay their insurance. I have to pay their workman's comp, half of their taxes. There's so much that goes into it. People have no idea. So like you were saying with your knives, there's a ton of stuff that you guys have to pay for. And it just takes a lot. All right, Ryan got a question here. Ryan Weir says this: did it start as a way to provide for your family or solely because you enjoy the hobby? And is that a direction or has that changed along the way?
Yeah, so I started just because, man, this looks really cool and I want to do it. I saw it on TV and I was like, hey, I want to do that. So that's how it started. I just wanted to do it as a hobby. And now I don't provide for my family with it. That's what my main job is for. But
Right.
like last year, we went on vacation, me and my wife did, and we were able to use some of that money for that, which was a bonus,
That's
but
awesome.
it doesn't provide for that. And then I don't see it changing that way.
Yeah. Ryan asked another question here. This is a really good question, and one I was going to get to here in a second. So, have you been able to incorporate this into your ministry in any way, whether it's by gifts or apprenticeship, cultivating relationships through time spent together? Have you been able to use this to minister to people or kind of disciple people?
Yeah, so that was something I always wanted to do once I started getting into it. I just wanted to turn it into a ministry type of thing. So yes, I've done gifts. So churches have contacted me before, but they said, "Hey, we're going to have like uh, a law enforcement appreciation day. Can you make like so many knives for that we can give away?" And
That's
I've
perfect.
done that where they pay for the price of materials, and I don't take any money from it. I just whatever it costs for the materials to make it,
Mm,
that's what I'll charge them. And so I've had a
yeah.
few churches do that. I've also my old Pastor Dave Brown, he had like his 50th year in the ministry celebration, and so I was able to make him a knife for that, just to be a blessing back to him because all the blessing he was to me.
Right.
So I've done things like that, gifting, um, and then also in the future, I want to start getting into classes where people can come out to my shop and they can make their own knife, and I want to be able to take that time to get to know people, but also while they're there, be able to turn things to the spiritual things,
Mm,
make it a ministry where, hey, where are you going to go when you die, just turn it
right.
spiritual things like that way. But
Right.
that's going to be in the future. Right now, a little bit busy to have the classes right now, but that's
Right.
hopefully this year we're going to get into that.
That's really cool. And I know you had one class like that where somebody came out. What was that experience like?
Yeah, so I did have a lady contact me, and she's like, "Hey, we saw you were on Forge and Fire. Do you do classes?" Because her son was visiting, and uh, she wanted something for her husband and her son to be able to do. So I was like, "Yeah, come on out." Um, and it was in the dead middle of summer. It was like
Oh,
110 degrees outside, and so I bring them out, and I got a forge going, and I got a thermometer in my shop, and it was like 126 or 130 degrees in there with the forge going. So it was miserable.
cut and wait for that wrestling, right?
Yeah, it was so
That's
hot.
so funny. Well, how'd it go? Like, did they like it? Was it something that
Oh
is
yeah.
that what kind of sparked the idea of like, I could make this a thing?
Well, I know a lot of people or guys that do that. They'll have people come out to their shop. Hey, just come out, make a knife real quick, and for like a day or two, um, just to kind of help them with their business.
Right.
And I was just kind of want to do that, just to kind of give back to people. Hey, I got the setup. You want to come out and make a knife? Just come hang
Right.
out, you know. So that's where that kind of came about.
Really, it's almost like if you wanted that to be a full-time thing, it would almost take a shift in thinking. It would probably be more about marketing and how you marketed it, because
Yeah,
you're not far from Seattle, so a lot of people in the city would like an experience where they don't have to, they don't have to, I don't want to say get their hands dirty, but they want to get their hands dirty. And a
yeah,
cheap way to do that, a lot of people pay for experiences like that. So if you marketed it the right way in a city, I could see people wanting to just go out west or go out east for a little bit
yeah,
and spend a day and make a knife. That'd be cool to start out the day with just a chunk of metal and end it with a knife that you take home that day.
yeah. Well, I was in Branson. Was it last year or the year before? Recently, in the time I went down to Branson, Missouri,
Right.
and there's a guy in there down there that that's what he does. He does the knife business, but during the day he has people. They'll pay for classes and they'll come out. They got to sign up for a certain time slot, and during that time slot they'll make a knife with him. He does like a cheap railroad knife. Takes
That's
about an
cool.
hour or two, but that's what kind of started it in my mind that hey, that's pretty easy. His is pretty quick. Um,
Right.
and the people that go there, they love it because you get
Yeah.
to do something like, wow, I just made a knife in like an hour or two. This is so crazy cool.
Right. That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, again, if you would like to ask a question, feel free to ask. We'd be happy to answer those. Ryan's got another question here. This is a great one. How do you have time limits and boundaries so that you balance really family and not neglect
Yes.
family time in the evening? How do you balance that?
So that was a big struggle when I first started because, there is so much knowledge and so much that you can learn through knife making. Like, people think that just because I won Forge and Fire that I know everything about knife making, and
Right.
really I know like hardly anything, just scratching the surface barely. So when I got into it, I was spending like all my free time, get off work, go out, forge till dark all the time. And so my wife kind of reminded me, you do have a wife. Do you love me more
Right.
than these knives, really? And well, yes, I love you more than these knives, but I got to learn this,
Right.
So it really had to made me think hey, I got to go out and I got to set boundaries. So right now in my job, I get home about 2:30. And so she gets home about 5 o'clock. So that gives me about 2.5 hours right after work that I can go out, mess around with that, get some stuff done. And then if I need a little bit more time, then I can do it on maybe a Saturday. So,
Right.
so I try to leave
That's
those
tough.
afternoons. Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
But I try to leave those afternoons that way. Hey, I get my time with my family. Um, but it's always a struggle. You always got to keep yourself in check
Right.
because maybe I'm not working out there, but what am I thinking about it?
Right. Well, the go-to excuse is I'm doing this for the family.
Yeah,
It's like, hey, if I do this, I can make some money so that we can go on vacation. And the
yeah,
truth is that, oh man, you can get so caught up in that where it's like you're missing out on the important things, which is time for a vacation that's going to last for a week. So you wasted the whole
yeah.
year for 1 week worth of time. It's tough. It really is hard to balance. That's a great question, Ryan. Um, oh, and hi, by the way, Ryan. It's good to hear from you.
Hi,
I haven't
Ryan.
talked to Ryan in forever. Um, Again, if you would like to ask a question, feel free to do that. Right now, what we'll do is take just a little bit of a break. Up in the corner of the screen, we have our sponsor, Kaffa Bun Roastery. And so if you are a coffee drinker, I want to encourage you to go to Kaffa Bun Roastery on their Facebook page or their website and check them out. They have a ton of different coffees. Wade, are you a coffee drinker?
I am not.
I'm not either. So it's really not
Yeah.
a great episode for that. But I do have this right here,
Oh, that
Kaffa
is
Bun
cool.
Roastery. They gave me that. It's pretty sweet. But they do have really good stuff. So everybody that is a coffee drinker, they love them. They roast them fresh, which is really cool. And this is another thing, kind of like what you're talking about. When somebody orders a knife, you get your hands on that metal, you make that knife out of nothing, and they do the same thing with these coffee beans. So they get their beans from Africa, South America, the Middle East, and they bring them to their house. They roast them as a family with their hands on, and then ship them out within a couple days. So you get freshly roasted beans. It's pretty cool. It's a really
Wow.
cool setup, and so I want to encourage everybody to be able to do that. If you use this promo code BIZA2EZ, BIZA, the number 2, and then EZ, you get free shipping on any order over $30. So make sure you use that and order some coffee. I know that would be appreciated by them. We had another question come in here. Ryan said, uh, time is what do we got here? Time is irredeemable. You can always make more money. That's true.
Yep.
Absolutely true. Yeah. It's hard because you got kids and they grow up so fast, and man, you want to do right by them, but that time goes quick. So what you try to do is work with your kids, and that's, to go back to our sponsor, exactly what they do. It's a family business. They work together. So go check out Kaffa Bun Roastery. You can find them on Facebook or on their website, and they'll be able to help you out and get you some really good coffee. All right, so I want to talk about the show.
Perfect.
And before we do, I feel like that was a really smooth transition to talk about our sponsor. That felt really good. So I'm
You're
not tooting my
amazing.
own horn, but thanks. um, I've been super curious about the show because and I was talking to Justin, one of our hosts on the podcast, about this. One of the most fascinating things to me is how they do the interview, because they have, and it's probably super simple, but they have the interview going while the show's going. And explain that process to me, because here's what it always, like, what I couldn't wrap my brain around. If I just lost, and I'm now doing an interview, I couldn't possibly just be like, yeah, so at this time I'm afraid of this little bubble in my medal or whatever. Clearly, I don't know what I'm talking about. Knowing I just lost and I'm trying to fake it like I didn't lose, but clearly they didn't stop the process to do an interview mid round. Explain the interview process that they cut to.
Okay, so you get there. I got there on a Monday morning, and like the first 4 or 5 hours of the day, they were doing like pre-interviews. So they go like, tell where you're from, how'd you get into it, and then you're just in this dark room. They ask you questions, and you got to answer them that way.
Okay.
That one's not so bad. That one's pretty easy. But then later that day, you do that first round. So the round where you usually go out and you make whatever knife they want. Mine was they called it a sax knife. So we had to make a sax knife out of Damascus. You do all that round, 3 hours. And people always ask, is it really like, do they ever stop the clock? They don't stop the clock. So they don't stop. You don't go do interviews. Well, you do interviews, but it's part of your time to make stuff. So
they do them right in the middle of the 3 hours.
some of them. So the ones you'll see at the interviews where there's like in the shop area,
right?
Those are the ones they do live. But most of the interviews are either before the show or before that round or after, right after.
So it's
my
just
first
part
round,
of your 3 hours.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it didn't take long. It took like maybe 5-10 minutes to do that interview they did. But anyway, you do that whole first round, and then once that 3 hours is done, then they'll take you back and they'll make you do interviews again. But you have to do it as if it's like you're talking live, basically.
Right.
So they're saying like, well, when I was doing this is what I was thinking, but it's got to be like present tense, which is very difficult for me.
Right. Well, do they help you? Like, hey, say it like this. Say that exact same thing, but say it this way to kind of help you out through the process?
They do try to help you out.
Right.
But it's hard for me.
Well, it'd be hard for me. Like I said, it'd be hard to think back to that moment, and that could have been 2 hours ago, and those feelings are gone,
Yep. Yeah, they are. That's the thing.
It's weird. That's weird. So, okay, first round on the show, you make that knife. Are you nervous? Do you feel like you've got it? Like this guy blew it, or I'm clearly getting through, or what was that like?
No, I was like terrified. I thought, man, this is like the worst knife ever. I'm going home in the morning because you do that first round. They don't send you home that first day. So you just film, do interviews, and then after that you go home or you go to your hotel and go to sleep. So I was thinking, man, this is a horrible night.
So they leave you overnight.
Yeah, you don't know what's gonna go on. You got to wait till the morning to figure out.
That's brutal.
Yeah, it is. Especially when you're thinking, man, I didn't really look at everybody else's, so I'm thinking, man, I know what problems I had on my stuff, and so I'm thinking, man, I'm going home in the morning. This is embarrassing. Well, man, yeah. So they make you wait till the next morning. You go and they do a few more interviews in the morning, but they're pretty quick ones. Right. But then you go right back into the main area where they judge them. So they'll go and they'll critique your knife, point out all the flaws. And so I was thinking, man, I'm going home, until they got to the final kid. So there was 4 of us, and that one kid, he had some major flaws that I didn't know about. He didn't even tell me last night, and I was thinking I was going home, but he had some really, really bad ones in his knife where he was the one that got kicked off. And so that was like nerve-wracking. Like I thought I was going home all the way up to that point.
So did you guys hang out at the hotel that night?
Yeah.
And just talk about it
all? So after
our
interviews, we went out to eat. We'd always go out to eat at night together.
That's cool. They give you like a per diem or something?
Yeah, they give you per diem.
That's cool. So you guys went out and just kind of shot the breeze and talked knives and stuff?
Yeah.
That's awesome. So go ahead.
So that's like right outside New York City. It's in Connecticut, but it's like an hour outside of New York City. So we'd always go out for like Italian food and stuff like that. Nice. So it was pretty cool.
Pizza. I heard
pizza, pasta. Yeah. I didn't get pizza, but the pasta was good.
That's awesome. Okay, so you get through round 1. Now you're down to these other 2. Explain the other 2 guys. I know the big dude who was in the final with you is a pretty accomplished knife maker. What about the other guy? Was he too?
So there was 4 of us total to start off with. So there was a younger kid. He was in college at the time. He's the one that got kicked off the first round. And he was pretty quiet, so I didn't really ever get to know what his experience was.
Right.
And then after the show, he kind of ghosted us. Like the other two guys, we talk all the time still, so we're pretty close. But the other kid, for whatever reason, he didn't want to talk to us old guys.
Out.
Yeah.
Weird.
But the older gentleman, Bob, he runs the biggest knife making group on Facebook. It's called Bladesmithing for Beginners, but they got like hundreds of thousands of members and everything. So he's pretty big in his own right. And then the big guy, Jimmy, he's from Florida as well. He lives in the same town that James is from, James Green.
Yeah.
So like I've seen some of his stuff before, and when I got to the show, I was like, man, this guy looks really familiar. And so we're kind of talking, and I figured out who he was, and I was like, oh, you know James? He's like, yeah, you know James?
That's awesome. Then you both went,
yeah.
That's so funny.
Yeah.
So at that point where you're like, oh boy, these guys are the real deal. Like I'm in trouble.
Yeah. So when I first met Jimmy, I was like, and I figured out who he was, and I was like, oh man, I got to go against this guy. I've seen some of the stuff he's done before, and it looks really good. But I was like, whatever, I guess I'll just do whatever I can, and we'll see how it goes.
Here we go.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Okay, so you get to that second round. What knife did you make in the second round?
So it's the same knife. So your first round, you just make the blade part of it. You forge it out.
You got to do the handle.
And then that next morning, the second day, they kicked off the kid, and then we started doing the handles for that knife and sharpen it, just completing it.
Right.
So we do all that the second day, finish those up, and then they do interviews afterwards again, like they did the first day.
Right.
They ask you like what you were thinking during this, and are you scared of anything? And
right.
I felt a little bit more confident at that point compared to the day before. I thought, man, my knife's I'm gonna get sent home the first day, but the second day I had a little bit more confidence. I was thinking, it's not terrible.
Right. Is it the same amount of time?
So your first round, you get 3 hours for the knife, and then your second round, we got 2 hours for the handle.
Okay.
But it was pretty simple because they gave us deer antlers.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like you got to do a whole lot to it other than just put a hole and put your knife through it.
Right. So
it's like it's pretty simple.
They do a good job. They make it suspenseful, but it's like you're just putting the handle on it, right? And basically epoxy
handle, and then you put an edge on the blade and sharpen it.
Okay, yeah, and then do you get custom like a tang? You can pick what you want to do there, or
so they give parameters for each round, and they tell you, you got to do this kind of a knife, or you got to do this kind of a handle. Ours, we had to do. It was called a button guard, which I guess just goes from the blade into the handle smoothly.
Right.
I guess I'd never heard of one before, but nobody else did it either. So.
Oh, that's cool. So did they help with that, or is it just like figure it out?
They just kind of told you, like, they gave an example blade, like the one they showed on there, and then they kind of explained this is what it has to be for it to hit parameters.
Right.
But cool. They didn't tell us like how to do it or anything.
So that's the one they put it to the test because now the knife's complete, right?
So that second day you finish, you do your interviews, and then they go home again. The third day you go back, and that's when you're not doing anything. You're just there for the testing. So, they do your makeup, do a few more interviews, and then you go into the area, the main testing area, and then they test them.
Right. So is this the first time you ever wore makeup?
Yes.
The pause had me worried there. So you go back, obviously, it's so you don't have this shine that I have right now. And
so they're putting it on. They're like, if you don't have this on, you're going to look like a ghost. I'm like, I already do.
Dude, I'll be a ghost.
Yeah.
That's awesome. All right, so you come back the next day. Again, that night you're all talking about your knives and everything and how you feel about them, comfortable?
We didn't talk too much. I mean, we talked about, like, we had a lot of problems with our grinders. So those guys were like, they broke 3 out of the 4 when we were on the show. And so they were, like, talking about that a lot, like, wow. Oh, this isn't our kind of grinder. We don't like these grinders, but I don't know.
Yeah, weird.
We didn't really talk about, like, so much about what our knives look like or anything.
Right. Yeah.
So
Okay, so they test him out. What is going through your mind as they're testing him out? If anybody has any questions before he answers, feel free to ask, and we'll get them up here for Wade to answer. So you're going through, and your knife's about to be tested. Was yours first, second, or third?
mine was the third to be
Okay.
tested. So they go in, they don't really tell you what they're going to do before. So you just kind of go in, and then right before they start filming, they'll explain, like, this is the test we're going to be doing. So on mine, it was David Baker is the judge. It was like his special tribute episode. So he was an old knife maker for Hollywood. And so that's kind of the theme that they had, was like Hollywood. And so they brought us in, and there's like, okay, for Hollywood theme, we're going to have him chop into these big camera lights, like metal encased camera lights with a knife. Not something you normally would do with a knife, but
right. It's like, why are we
that's
doing
what they
this?
wanted. Yeah. But anyway, they're all getting tested
cool.
the same, so it doesn't matter.
Right.
So they tested Jimmy's was the first. His went through, did really good. But then when Bob, the second guy, he went, they hit it a bunch. But then his handle broke off. The knife completely broke off and stuck right into the ground. And like once that happened, we're like, oh no, what the heck? What happened? We're like, we don't know. Am I supposed to say something?
Super scary, too.
Scary. I'm happy, but I'm also sad.
Right.
But
it's like, oh, sorry,
I feel
dude.
bad for him, but yeah.
It's like, as long as mine doesn't break, I'm pretty much in, right? Like,
yeah. Basically, yeah.
That's crazy.
So that's what they kind of played up. They're like, oh, his last had so many hits. So wait, if you're going to advance to the next round, you got to make it this many hits. Right. And so like they go and they start testing, you're counting, and you're thinking, man, I hope I'm counting right.
Right.
And they got done.
That's
I'm
awesome.
looking. I was like, is it together still? Is it okay? Am I through? What's going on?
That's awesome.
So like once you realize, you're like, oh, it's kind of like relief.
Right.
And you're like thinking like, what in the world? I'm going to the finals now.
That's crazy. So could you tell they were trying to create suspense, trying to make it more than what it was?
They do a little bit. Like, I mean, this is just part of the nature of the show. They're trying to get a, like a story or something going on, something to draw people in. But it wasn't like they were going over the top, like, oh no, this is gonna like ruin the rest of your life or anything weird like that.
Right. Yeah.
But they do a little bit, just kind of. It's what it is. It's TV.
It's like, and we'll be right back from this commercial.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So you're in the final, and you're like, okay. They explained that they want a sword, which was awesome, like classic sword. And then they said fantasy, obviously, on there for the movie.
Fantasy broadsword.
So broadsword to me is like what I want to see in every final round.
Yeah,
it's so perfect because it's what you would want if you were in battle. I feel like that's what I would want.
Oh yeah,
and so it was like that. Because I've seen shows where it's like this two-handled sword and it's this huge English thing or some fencing sword or samurai or whatever. And so I'm like, when I saw this, I was like, this is beautiful. Yeah. Did you know at that moment, this is what I'm doing? Or because you pulled probably one of the most amazing endings I've ever seen on the show.
Yeah.
to do what you did. How did that come about?
So they bring you back in after they do some more interviews that day. That was that third day. So they bring you back in and they explain, hey, you guys are going home to your home to make these things, and then you're going to make a fantasy broadsword. I'm thinking, oh man, that's kind of cool. Like, what am I going to make? I don't know. And I'm thinking about it like, and so like in between interviews and everything, when you're on set, they got you like, it was during COVID, so they had us in like these little cubby hole things. Mm-hmm. It was like little dressing rooms, but it was like a closet basically. But I'm just in there and I'm thinking, man, what am I going to make? And it just came to my head like, man, you should make a sword that looks like David Baker, the judge. He's got this, if you don't know what he looks like, he's got the handlebar mustache and sometimes he's got a goatee, but he's usually got facial hair. So I'm thinking, man, I could make a sword that's got a goatee and a mustache, and I'll just make it look like him. That'd be so cool. And I kind of was starting to draw it up on paper in my dressing room, and it just kind of came out of nowhere.
That's awesome. Because I think most people, whenever I heard fantasy, I was like, okay, is this some like dragon hand cover or something crazy like that? But man, it was so perfect. And when I saw it, I was like, this is the most Wade thing I've ever seen.
Yeah.
It was awesome. So What was the process like? Obviously, you go home and you do that in your own home forge. What was that process like?
Yeah, so they send you home, whatever. And I think I had like a day to get home. Maybe it was a couple days to get home, and I was gonna film like 3 days after that. So it was like boom, 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 start filming. Then you get 4 days to film at your house. The first day is like, I think the first day is 5 hours of actual working on the sword.
Right.
And then the next 3 days is 10-hour days of working on the sword. And then you get interviews before and after. So it's a little bit longer, but 35 working hours on the sword. And I like, at the time I had a home built forge with like, it was big, but it wasn't like crazy
Right.
hot to be able to, like, you wouldn't want to make a sword normally in this forge.
Right.
And I knew that. And so like, I got home a day early and I was like trying to revamp it, getting all hooked up and everything, trying to get it hotter and everything. But once it started, I started it up at like not near as hot as it needed. It was like colder than I originally had it. So I kind of had to like hurry up and switch everything back before the show started or the filming.
Right. Because
So
they're
like,
pretty strict on the time, right? Like they don't let
once
you mess
this
around
clock
with it.
starts, they don't stop it. I think they stop it for lunch. Was the only time during the day they stopped it. And
Right.
it's like you don't touch any tools, nothing. So
Right.
yeah, they're pretty strict on it.
And that was just through camera. There wasn't like a person there.
There was two camera guys there. So one guy was actually the camera
Okay.
guy, and one guy was like a, I don't know, editor or whatever they do.
Right.
So the director kind of guy.
He's just kind of making sure, watching you work.
Yeah, watching work, trying to like set up good shots, ask you
Right.
questions to talk about, just kind of get the show built up.
Right. Right.
You know,
Pretty
like what
cool
problems are you
experience.
having right now? What's going on now?
Right.
Oh yeah, it was a fun experience. Like everything was like really rushed and like last minute, but it was like, hey, this is
It's
really
pretty
cool.
cool. It's like, what is happening in my backyard?
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
All right, so you make your blade. It's ready. You look at it. I mean, the was it the pommel, the end? Is that what that is?
Yeah, the pommel,
So
the
the
beard.
pommel is like this perfect beard. Are you
Yeah.
going, this is everything I wanted it to be?
I wanted it to look more like a beard than I actually got it, but I was just drawing a blank at the end, so like it's
Right.
got the shape of it, but I kind of wanted like whisker hairs in there.
Yeah,
And
like
I
Dremel
just
or
couldn't
something.
get, yeah, I was trying to
Yeah.
Dremel it in and it wasn't, my hand wasn't steady enough or something, but it wasn't coming out. It just looked like I
Right.
was scratching it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so you get back to the show, um, and they see it. Like their reaction to it was so
Yeah.
awesome. What did they see it before, or did they just not know what it was until you
Um,
explained it?
I'm not sure if they saw it before or if they just didn't know exactly what it
Yeah,
was when they first saw it. But they have you go in and they're filming, they're having you, hey, explain what you made while you were gone or whatever. So I explained, hey, this is the David Blader because it looks like David Baker. And so
right.
once I said that, they're like, oh, and they kind of like things are going on in their head and they all
They're
start
like,
laughing.
oh,
Yeah. Well, Doug
that's so
Markita, he's
funny.
the knife specialist or the weapons specialist.
Right,
He was having so much fun with that. He's kind of a jokester anyway, but he was like putting it up in front of his face, like looking back at Dave all the
right.
time with it, just having fun with it.
That's awesome. Like, so to me, that just was like, this is TV. This is
Oh
what
yeah.
they want.
Oh
They
yeah.
if they could write a script, this is how they would write it because
Yeah.
that's just too good. It's too good. So now they got to test it. How did they test it?
Yeah, so they always do tests on their stuff and they usually do like a strength or a sharpness test just to kind of test the different aspects of the knife or the sword.
Right.
And before I got there, I was like, man, I really like a hog. Like, a pig would be cool,
Yeah.
or a dummy person would be cool, but I really want a hog. A hog would be like my dream thing.
Let's chop something up. Yeah.
Yeah. And so we walk in. I didn't know what they were testing on, but as soon as we walk in there, I see it. I was like, yes, yes, perfect.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Is it sharp? Did you make it pretty? You made it pretty sharp.
I made it sharp enough to shave, so shave arm hair with.
Wow,
So it was sharp. Yeah.
that's awesome. Uh, is it if you get it too sharp, can it dent? Because sometimes you'll see the dents on stuff,
Yeah.
and
You can make them where the edge is so thin that it
right.
can take on more damage than it needs to.
So you don't
But
want
I
to
know
just
I
make
kind
it.
of want it. Yeah. I wanted to make it sharp enough where it could do the sharpness test, but I didn't want to make it like crazy thin where it's going to be denting or cracking or anything weird like that, which it didn't. So I was happy.
So you get through that first one and feeling pretty good going into the second?
Yeah, so I was the second one to get tested this time, so I was always the last person to get tested, or done testing on. So Jimmy goes and his chops through the whole thing, and I'm thinking, man, this is so cool. They're just chopping through it in real life, and I'm watching this thing. I'm like, oh, this is so cool. And then they get to mine, I'm like, oh, I can't wait. I want to see what this thing does. And that first swing he does, it goes and it hits the hog right in the shoulder, and it just goes like really deep. Like I could tell, like, oh, this thing is like brutal,
awesome.
Sharp, and it's going like. And so the whole thing, I'm like, oh, this is so cool.
Yeah, you're living what you've watched.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
That's amazing. That's got to be a cool feeling.
And it was the test I wanted, and went through and it did exactly what I wanted it to.
Right.
Which was I've never made a sword before, so I'm kind of guessing on a lot of stuff, but
yeah, it worked.
It worked. Awesome. Did what I wanted.
All right. So after that, what did they move to?
So then they went and they called it a giant helmet chop. So if giants were to wear helmets, these are the helmets that they were going to be chopping into.
Right.
So again, they tested Jimmy's first, and they're going, and I forget how many hits it was, but so many hits into it, his pommel on his breaks off.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't really realize it. I just kind of heard something like thud hit the ground when Doug was chopping. Or no, it was Dave Baker was chopping. And I just heard a thud on the ground. I was like, what was that? Well, then I saw it. I'm like, oh no, his tang or his pommel broke off. And so they kind of inspected a little bit, like see like what happened really. And they're explaining like, oh, his tang, which is the part of the blade that goes through the handle.
Right.
It's the same piece of metal, but it goes all the way through the handle. And they're like, it was so small and thin that it broke so easy. And so they're explaining that, and I'm thinking, oh no, mine's really thin right there too. I'm thinking, oh no, is the same thing going to happen? Is it going to happen earlier, or what's going to happen?
Right.
But I know that mine's like really thin in that same spot as Jimmy's was. And so I'm like kind of nervous. I'm like, but I just got to last one more hit than him.
Right.
So they're going, and each one I'm thinking, okay, don't break. Another hit. Oh, don't break. Oh, don't break. And they make it through, and I'm like, wait, does that mean...
Did I just win?
Yeah, does that mean I won? What just happened here? And it's kind of like, it takes a minute for it to like process in your mind. And you're like, what is going on?
Right. That's awesome. So you win the show that you just a couple years earlier got you into knife making.
Yep.
And it's like this full circle moment. What's that like? What's going through your mind when you win?
Just overwhelmed at the moment. It took a while for it to sit in. Like, even though we were on the show and everything, and they're telling you like, oh, you won. What are you going to do now? Blah, blah.
Right.
I'm thinking like, how did this happen? What is going on? But I was able to reflect once I got back to my hotel and everything, and it was like, I can't believe this just happened. Like, I just kind of did it to make sure, like, sure, I'll put my name out there for an interview. Oh, sure, I'll go out there and just do whatever I can, do my best.
Right.
To actually winning the whole thing and joining that list of like Forge and Fire champions now.
Right. It's pretty cool. Did you get anything like to commemorate it, or did they give you anything?
They don't give you anything. So, I mean, they give you a $10,000 check once the show airs, which I was filming in May, June time. And then it didn't actually air till December, right after Christmas. So it was a long while, and they don't talk to you or anything. They don't tell you when it's going to air till like a week before. And you're like, what happened?
Yeah.
And
did you guys cut the show?
Quiet. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And you're not allowed to say anything, obviously. So.
Yeah. So they have
was
like
that hard?
If I were to do it, it probably would have been.
You come back and says champion.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
No, but my wife did buy me a license plate, a custom license plate. It says Forge and Fire. Ooh.
That's awesome.
Sorry. It says Forge and Fire champion. So I got that on my truck.
Yeah.
Drive that around.
That's perfect.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. So any chance you go back?
I don't think so. So they're having a lot of trouble trying to get shows aired right now. Like they have 20 episodes right now that are filmed, but nobody knows why they're not. Nobody knows what's going on. They're not airing right now. So.
Oh, weird.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's interesting. So I guess there's a lot of reasons why that could
It
be the
could be. I
case,
think they were
but
having a strike too, but I'm not
right.
100% sure.
Yeah.
But I don't know if you heard this. Jason Kelsey is
Yeah.
the football player that retired, right?
Yeah. Right.
So he was talking. He has a podcast, and he was talking to his brother Travis, who's another football player. But they were talking about like, oh, you're retired now. What do you want to do? And he's like, well, maybe I'd want to go make a knife. That'd be really cool. I've seen Forge and Fire. I love that show. Well, Doug Marcaida, one of the judges, heard about it, and so they said, hey, why don't you come on Forge and Fire and make a knife? And so I guess they're trying to get an episode like that together. But
that would be awesome.
That would be really cool. I'm thinking, hey, if he needs like help, I could be his helper.
Right.
I don't care.
Message him.
I'll do it for free.
I mean, you got the beard. You look like him. I mean, let's do it. Let's have a bearded show and have all you guys.
Yeah, there you go.
That'd be sweet. That's so cool. Well, I appreciate you taking the time. I've always wondered about some of that stuff. If anybody has any questions they want to ask real quick before we get off, we're going to wind down here. But I've always wondered about what that show was like, and it's a really cool opportunity that you got. It's a really cool story.
Yeah, very unique.
It's pretty cool. I mean, we had for us, we had a watch party. So I think I had like 15 people at my house, and it was like the Super Bowl. We were eating food and watching it live, and it was awesome. We had such a good time.
Well, that comes on after church when you guys are, right?
Yeah. So it was after it aired at like 9:00 or something.
Yeah. So it airs right when I'm in church. So I'm like, I didn't even get to see it live.
So actually, I think maybe we recorded it, but then we caught the second half live or something. I don't remember.
Oh, okay.
But we watched it all, and it was awesome. It was so fun to sit around, and I think one of my friends has a knife from you, and so he had it. We were showing everybody in the living room, like, hey, he made it, and all this stuff.
Yeah.
And I think actually we made the little symbol for you too a long time ago. The logo maybe or something.
Oh, I think you digitized it, but my sister-in-law actually designed that.
That's right. We digitized it. That's what it was. It was. And so that's how he heard about you a long time ago, and he got a knife from you. So that was pretty cool. Anyway, it was kind of cool to see it come full circle. That's awesome that it came full circle for you in life too.
Yes.
It's pretty cool. So again, if anybody else wants to order a knife, or anybody sees this video and they want to check it out, how do they do that? Instagram or?
Instagram, at Plumlee Knives, and then Facebook, Wade Plumlee.
Okay.
I post everything on there whenever I have stuff available, and it's first come, first serve.
That's cool. Well, hopefully this will get you a couple sales, and we'll.
Hey, I'm almost to 1,000 followers on Instagram, and there may or may not be a 1,000 follower giveaway.
Okay.
May or may not.
Let's talk about that. So if we have a giveaway, we need to follow on Instagram and keep up, because that might be coming. How close are you?
I did one when I got 100 people, which was a long time ago.
Right.
And that one worked really good, I thought. But this one, I'm thinking once I hit 1,000, I got a knife already in mind. I'm working on Damascus. But it might be, instead of having people post or tag people, this one might be, tell me which knife I've made that is your favorite that I've made, and why it's your favorite. Nice. And that'll be an entry for each.
Oh, that's cool. That's a good idea.
Yeah.
That'll be fun. Well, I'll keep an eye out. If you're watching the video, keep an eye out on it. And whenever he gets the contest going, we'll have to let you know. What time is it? It's March 23rd right now. So
perfect.
How many followers you said you have? You're getting close?
Last I checked was 980.
980.
It was under 20 or 20 or something like that.
All right. So if you're following along, go to Instagram and follow them. Let's get into that 1,000 and get this thing going. That'd be cool.
Let's do it.
Thanks again for talking about it. It's a really cool experience that you got to have.
Yeah,
but also
thanks for having me on.
how to balance the side hustle. I mean, there's a lot of people who are doing that, and it's hard to do, but it's worth it for sure.
So. It is a lot of fun, but a lot of work.
Yeah, we'll keep an eye out too. Maybe we can do a revisit whenever you roll out the visit you and make a knife for a day or something like that. We'll have you back on and kind of promote it a little bit to our 18 followers. So
yep, there we go.
Maybe one of them will fly out there or something.
There you go.
And do it. Well, thanks, man, for coming on, especially short notice like we did, and first live. So you will go down in the history books.
Epic failure. Oh, no.
No, I think it went well.
Okay. No, it did go well.
Yeah. All right. Well, again, thanks for being on the show. If you guys want coffee, order coffee from Kava Bun. Make sure you do that. And we'll have some more interviews lined up. I'm really excited about one interview I've got with a window cleaner who has a YouTube channel. So we're going to be talking about the business side of YouTube and what that looks like. And then we'll also be talking to somebody else who has a software company. So we haven't really talked to anybody in that. So those are some interviews we got coming up, and I'm really looking forward to it. So Wade, thank you for your time, and thank you to your wife, who's the real MVP for dealing with all your time away making knives and and allowing us to do the interview in your living room. So
yes.
All right, man. It's good to see you.
All right. Yep. We'll catch you later.
See you around.